Ever wondered which 90s supercars were actually worth their astronomical price tags? Picture this. You're at a 1990s auto show, surrounded by wedge-shaped exotics with pop-up headlights and promises of 200+ miles per hour. Some delivered on those promises. Others, well, let's just say they looked better in the posters than they performed on the road. Today we're ranking 20 supercars from the decade of excess, starting with the machines that missed the mark and building up to the absolute pinnacle of 90s engineering. From kit car wannabes to the gold-lined engine bay that redefined what a supercar could be, we're covering them all. So buckle up, because some of these rankings might surprise you. And hey, if you enjoy deep dives into automotive history, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. Number 20. Vector M12. The Vector M12 was supposed to be America's answer to European supercar dominance. Built between 1995 and 1999, this wedge-shaped curiosity borrowed its heart from Lamborghini, specifically the Diablo's 5.7-liter V12 engine. Sounds promising, right? Well, that's where the good news ends. Vector Automotive had ambitious plans. They wanted to create something that looked like it drove straight out of a sci-fi movie, and visually, they succeeded. The M12's angular design was pure 1980s excess carried into the 90s. It looked like a stealth fighter had mated with a doorstop. The interior continued the fighter jet theme with toggle switches and digital displays that seemed cutting edge at the time. But here's the thing about borrowing an engine from Lamborghini. You also need Lamborghini's engineering expertise to make it work properly. Vector didn't have that. The build quality was, to put it kindly, questionable. Panel gaps you could stick your finger through, electrical gremlins that would make a British car blush, and driving dynamics that felt more kit car than supercar. The chassis couldn't handle the power. The suspension was poorly sorted. The steering felt disconnected. Journalists who drove it reported that it felt like the front and rear of the car were having two different conversations. One tester memorably described it as a Lamborghini engine trapped in a high school shop project. Only about 14 M12s were ever built, not because they were exclusive, but because the company kept running into financial troubles. Vector went through multiple ownership changes, lawsuits, and production delays. By the time they sorted out their issues, the supercar world had moved on. Today, the M12 is remembered as a cautionary tale about ambition exceeding capability. It had all the right ingredients: exotic looks, Italian power, American audacity, but couldn't bake them into a cohesive cake. When your Lamborghini-powered supercar makes people wish they'd bought the actual Lamborghini instead, you know something went wrong. Number 19. Ascari Ecos. The Ascari Ecos arrived in 1998 with a peculiar proposition. Here was a British supercar powered by a BMW V8, built by a company nobody had heard of, priced like established exotics. Only 17 were ever made, and there's a good reason for that. Ascari Cars, founded by Dutch millionaire Klaus Zwart, had racing ambitions. They wanted to build road cars to fund their motorsport activities. The Ecos was their first attempt, and it showed. On paper, it didn't sound terrible. A 4.4-liter BMW V8 producing 300 horsepower, rear-wheel drive, carbon fiber body panels, a claimed top speed of 155 miles per hour. But supercars aren't built on paper. The execution was rough. The Ecos looked like someone had described a supercar over the phone to someone who'd never seen one. It had all the right elements: low nose, wide stance, aggressive air intakes, but they didn't quite gel. It looked like a kit car trying very hard to sit at the grown-ups table. And that kit car feel extended beyond just looks. The interior was a parts bin special, BMW switchgear mixed with aftermarket gauges. The driving position was awkward. The visibility was terrible. The build quality was inconsistent, with some cars having better panel fit than others. Performance-wise, the Ecos was adequate, but hardly super. 300 horsepower in 1998 wasn't impressive when a Porsche 911 Turbo made 400. The handling was described as safe. Not exactly what you want from a supercar. It understeered heavily and lacked the adjustability that made contemporaries like the Lotus Esprit so engaging. The real nail in the coffin was the price. Ascari wanted serious money for the E-Cos, around £100,000. For that money, you could buy a Porsche 911 Turbo, a Ferrari 355, or even a used 512 TR. Cars with heritage, dealer networks, and proven performance. The E-Cos faded quickly into obscurity. Ascari would later create the much more competent A10, but the E-Cos remains a footnote in supercar history. A reminder that building a supercar takes more than just bolting a big engine into a low-slung body. Number 18. Venturi 400 GT. The Venturi 400 GT was France's moonshot attempt at supercar glory. Built between 1994 and 1997, it pioneered technology that wouldn't become mainstream for another decade. It was also a commercial disaster that almost nobody bought. Venturi had been building sports cars since the 1980s, but the 400 GT was their most ambitious project yet. They threw everything at it. Carbon fiber construction, a twin-turbo 3-liter V6 making over 400 horsepower. And here's the kicker, carbon ceramic brakes in 1994. This was genuine innovation. Ferrari wouldn't offer carbon ceramics until the Enzo in 2002, but being first doesn't always mean being best. The 400 GT's carbon ceramic brakes worked well when hot, but were grabby when cold. Owners complained about unpredictable braking in normal driving conditions. The rest of the car was equally rough around the edges. The twin-turbo V6 made good power but delivered it with all the subtlety of a light switch. Below 3,000 RPM, nothing. Then the turbos would spool up, and suddenly you had all 400 horses trying to break the rear tires loose. Turbo lag was measured in geological time. The chassis was competent but uninspiring. It lacked the delicacy of a Lotus or the brutality of a Viper. It sat in an awkward middle ground, not comfortable enough for grand touring, not sharp enough for track work. The interior felt like a 1980s French car with some leather thrown at it. Switchgear from parts bins, and driving position that worked for nobody. Then there was the styling. The 400 GT looked like a generic supercar drawn from memory. It wasn't ugly, just forgettable. In a decade defined by outrageous designs, being anonymous was a death sentence. Venturi built fewer than 2,400 GTs before pulling the plug. The company limped along, making other models before eventually transitioning to electric vehicles. The 400 GT remains a curiosity, a car that pioneered important technology but wrapped it in a package nobody wanted to buy. Today, it's a trivia question for supercar nerds. What was the first production car with carbon ceramic brakes? The answer is a French supercar so obscure, most people have never heard of it. Number 17. Lotus Esprit 5.8. The Lotus Esprit 5.8 should have been brilliant. After decades of four-cylinder engines, Lotus finally stuffed a proper V8 into their wedge-shaped icon. What emerged in 1996 was fast, flawed, and frustrating in equal measure. Lotus developed their own 3.5-liter twin-turbo V8, claiming it was the smallest production V8 in the world. It made 350 horsepower, later bumped to 500 in Sport 350 form. Finally, the Esprit had the grunt to match its looks. The engine was a jewel, smooth, responsive, with a metallic shriek at high RPM that sounded properly exotic. But Lotus, in typical fashion, had champagne engine ambitions on a beer budget. They paired this lovely engine with a Renault transaxle that was about as robust as wet cardboard. The UN1 gearbox was designed for much less power. In the V8 Esprit, it became a ticking time bomb. Owners reported failed synchros, stripped gears, and complete transmission failures. Rebuilds cost thousands. Some owners went through multiple gearboxes. It became the car's Achilles heel. Performance was strong but not stellar by late 90s standards. 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. Top speed of 175 miles per hour. Quick, but a 360 Modena was quicker. A 911 Turbo was much quicker. And both were infinitely more reliable. The chassis remained brilliant. Lotus's expertise shone through in the handling. The Esprit V8 changed direction like a startled cat. The steering talked to you in full sentences. The balance was adjustable on the throttle. On the right road, it was magic. But you couldn't escape the kit car feel. The interior was a mess of aftermarket-looking switches and gauges. The driving position was designed for someone with very specific proportions, none of them human. The air conditioning worked when it felt like it. The electrics were more temperamental than a soap opera star. By 2004, when production ended, the Esprit felt like a relic. Newer rivals had better engines, better gearboxes, better everything. The Esprit 5.8 remains a what-if story. What if Lotus had the budget for a proper gearbox? What if they'd sorted the quality issues? Instead, it's remembered as a brilliant chassis let down by everything else. Fast enough to play with the big boys, but too fragile to play for long. Number 16. Lister Storm. The Lister Storm was what happened when a racing team decided to build a road car. Arriving in 1993, it packed a 7-liter Jaguar 512 and looked like it could batter its way through a brick wall, which, given its racing success, it practically did. Lister had been modifying Jaguars since the 50s, but the Storm was their first ground-up design. They started with racing in mind. The Storm would compete at Le Mans, in FIA GT, anywhere that allowed very fast, very loud cars to circulate. The road version was essentially a byproduct, and that's exactly how it felt. The 7-liter V12 made 546 horsepower. In 1993, that was serious firepower. The Storm could hit 200 miles per hour when most supercars struggled to crack 190. It sounded like the apocalypse. Starting it up probably violated noise ordinances in 3 counties. But here's the thing about race cars. They make terrible road cars. The Storm had 4 seats, technically. The rear ones were suitable for legless children or groceries, not both. The trunk barely held a briefcase. The interior was sparse, loud, and hot. Really hot. The exhausts ran under the car, turning the cabin into a mobile sauna. The ride was brutal. Lister set it up for smooth racetracks, not potholed British roads. Every bump sent shockwaves through your spine. The clutch was heavy enough to give you a left leg like a bodybuilder. The steering was heavy at low speeds. The gearbox was agricultural. On track, though, the Storm came alive. It won races. It took on Porsche, Ferrari, and McLaren in FIA GT and often beat them. The racing version was a proper weapon, but success on Sunday didn't translate to sales on Monday. The road car was too compromised, too uncomfortable, too impractical. It was a race car with number plates, and buyers wanted more refinement from their 6-figure supercars. Lister built just 4 road-going Storms. They kept racing them successfully through the 90s, but the road car experiment ended quickly. Today, the Storm is remembered more for its racing success than its road car failure, which, for a company like Lister, was probably the point all along. They built a race car that happened to be road legal, not a road car that could race. In that context, it succeeded brilliantly. Number 15, Cizeta 516T. The Cizeta 516T was the fever dream of an ex-Lamborghini engineer who decided that what the world really needed was a supercar with 16 cylinders arranged sideways. If that sounds insane, well, welcome to the early 90s. Claudio Zampoli, who'd worked on the Countach, partnered with musician Giorgio Moroder to create the ultimate supercar. Their solution to everything was more cylinders, more width, more complexity, more of absolutely everything except common sense. The engine was essentially two V8s joined at the crank, mounted transversely behind the driver. This made the car absurdly wide, over 2 meters. It looked like someone had put a Countach in a taffy puller and stretched it sideways. Parking it required a commercial license and a spotter. The styling, penned by Marcello Gandini, was pure excess. Every surface had a vent, a scoop, or a crease. The rear window was a mail slot. The doors opened upward because of course they did. It looked like a spaceship designed by someone who'd never heard of aerodynamics. But the real party trick was that V16. It made 540 horsepower and sounded like nothing else on earth. 16 cylinders firing in sequence created a sound somewhere between a Formula One car and a swarm of angry bees. At full throttle, it was intoxicating. The rest of the experience was less intoxicating. The Ceseda weighed over 1,700 kilograms. All that width made it terrifying on narrow roads. The complexity meant something was always broken. The transverse engine layout put all the weight at one end, making handling interesting. Performance was adequate but not exceptional. 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. Top speed of 204 miles per hour. A Diablo was faster. A Ferrari 512 TR was much faster. And both were infinitely more usable. The price was astronomical, around $300,000 in early 90s money. For that, you could buy a house, or 3 Diablos, or a small island. Unsurprisingly, buyers chose the other options. Ceseda built maybe 20 cars over several years. Zampoli kept trying to revive the company throughout the 90s and 2000s, occasionally building a car to order. But the V16T remained what it always was, an engineering curiosity that proved more isn't always better. Sometimes it's just more complicated, more expensive, and more likely to leave you stranded on the side of the road, wondering why you didn't just buy a Ferrari. Number 14. Dodge Viper GTS. The Dodge Viper GTS arrived in 1996 like a sledgehammer in a world of scalpels. While Europeans fussed over aerodynamics and sophistication, Dodge built a car with one philosophy: biggest engine wins. Subtlety was not on the menu. The heart of the beast was an 8-liter V10. That's right, 8 liters, 450 horsepower, 500 pounds of torque. Numbers that made European engineers check their calculators. It was truck engine technology refined just enough to fit in a car, just barely. The GTS added a roof to the original Viper Roadster, along with more power and slightly better aerodynamics. The double-bubble roof became iconic. The blue with white stripes paint scheme is still what people picture when they think Viper. It looked like America's idea of a Le Mans racer. But driving a Viper GTS was like wrestling an alligator. The clutch was heavy enough to count as leg day at the gym. The shifter required genuine effort. The side pipes cooked your legs. The cabin got hot enough to bake bread. Air conditioning was technically available, but functionally useless. The handling was exciting. That massive engine sat way up front, making the weight distribution 50-50 in theory, but nose-heavy in practice. The rear end would step out with little warning. The massive 335-section rear tires would suddenly decide they'd had enough and let go. No traction control, no stability management, no safety net. Just you, 500 pound-feet of torque, and your own mortality. The interior was an afterthought. Cheap plastics everywhere. Gauges that looked like they came from AutoZone. Seats that provided minimal support. The only luxury was having a roof over your head, and even that rattled at speed. Yet somehow the Viper GTS worked. It was honest. It never pretended to be sophisticated. It was a big, dumb, loud American muscle car that happened to be shaped like a supercar. It could run with Ferraris in a straight line and scare their owners to death. On a track, in the right hands, it was devastatingly fast. It won Le Mans in class. It dominated IMSA racing. The race versions proved that brute force could indeed overcome engineering elegance. The GTS lasted until 2002, becoming an American icon. It was crude compared to Europeans, but that was the point. While Ferrari made rolling art and Porsche pursued perfection, Dodge built a car that punched you in the face and asked if you wanted another. Sometimes that's exactly what you need. Number 13. Jaguar XJR-15. The Jaguar XJR-15 was what happened when someone decided to make a Le Mans car road legal, not inspired by Le Mans, not loosely based on a race car, an actual Le Mans car with license plates. The results were predictably brutal. Based on the XJR-9 that won Le Mans in 1988, the XJR-15 was the first road car with a carbon fiber monocoque. In 1991, this was space-age stuff. The whole car weighed just 1,050 kilograms. That's lighter than a modern Mazda MX-5. With a 6-liter V12 making 450 horsepower, performance was explosive. 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds, 0 to 100 in 8 seconds. This in 1991, when most supercars needed 5 seconds to hit 60. But those numbers only tell part of the story. The XJR-15 was a pure race car. The clutch was an on-off switch. The gearbox whined like a Le Mans car because it was from a Le Mans car. The suspension had all the compliance of granite. Every road imperfection shot through the carbon tub straight into your spine. The interior was hilarious. 2 carbon shells that vaguely resembled seats, a steering wheel, some gauges. That's it. No radio, obviously, no air conditioning, no carpets. The dashboard was just exposed carbon fiber. The only concession to comfort was thin padding on the seats. Maybe. Getting in required the flexibility of a yoga instructor. The doors were tiny. The sills were wide. The seating position was pure race car. Legs straight out, nearly lying down. Once in, visibility was terrible. The mirrors showed mostly bodywork. The view forward was like looking through a letterbox. Driving it on the road was an exercise in masochism. The engine needed revs to work properly. The aerodynamics only functioned above 100 miles per hour. Below that, it was just harsh, loud, and uncomfortable. The steering was heavy. The pedals required race car leg strength. After 20 minutes, you'd be sweating, deaf, and possibly concussed. Jaguar built just 53 XJR-15s. At 200,000 pounds, they weren't cheap. But for those who wanted the most authentic race car experience possible on the road, nothing else came close. It made other supercars feel like luxury sedans. Today, the XJR-15 is a collector's holy grail. Not because it's pleasant to drive, it absolutely isn't, but because it represents supercar purity. No compromises, no comfort, just speed, violence, and carbon fiber. It's both terrible and wonderful, often in the same moment. Number 12. Ferrari 512TR. The Ferrari 512TR arrived in 1991 as the evolution of the iconic Testarossa. Ferrari took their bedroom poster star and sharpened it. More power, better handling, cleaner styling. It was the Testarossa finally growing up. The flat 12 engine grew to 5 liters and gained more power, 428 horsepower. The gearbox was improved. The suspension was revised. The weight came down slightly. But the biggest changes were visual. Gone were the side strakes that made the Testarossa famous. In their place, a cleaner design with a single air intake. The pop-up headlights gave way to exposed units behind glass. It looked more modern, more serious. Some said it lost character. Others said it finally looked like it belonged in the 90s. Performance improved across the board. 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds. Top speed of 195 miles per hour. The handling was sharper, with less of the Testarossa's tendency to understeer. The gear shift was improved, though still heavy by modern standards. But the 512TR had a timing problem. By 1991, mid-engine supercars were the future. The 348 was already in showrooms. The F355 was coming. The 512TR, with its engine behind the rear axle, felt like yesterday's technology. The driving experience was old school. The flat 12 made glorious noise, but delivered its power in a linear, predictable way. No turbo drama, no high RPM fireworks, just a wall of torque and that distinctive flat 12 wail. Some loved it. Others found it boring compared to newer rivals. The weight distribution remained problematic. That massive engine hanging out back made the front end light at speed. In the wet, it could be terrifying. The rear would pendulum around that heavy engine. It required respect and smooth inputs. Ferrari built 2,285 12TRs over 4 years. Not rare, but not common either. It occupied an awkward position, better than the Testarossa it replaced, but overshadowed by the mid-engine cars Ferrari was also selling. Today, the 512TR is appreciated for what it was, the last of the old-school Ferrari supercars. The final evolution of a bloodline that started with the 365 GT4 BB. It represented the end of an era. After this, Ferrari supercars would be mid-engine, all-wheel drive, electronically managed. The 512TR was the last of the analog dinosaurs, beautiful, flawed, and impossibly charismatic. Number 11. Acura NSX. The Acura NSX didn't just enter the supercar world in 1990. It kicked the door down and rewrote the rules. Honda's engineers looked at Ferrari and Lamborghini and asked a simple question. Why does a supercar have to be unreliable, uncomfortable, and impossible to live with? The answer changed everything. Honda spent years developing the NSX. They benchmarked the Ferrari 328, then set out to beat it in every measurable way. Ayrton Senna helped develop the chassis. Honda's Formula One experience influenced everything. The result was a supercar that worked every single day. The all-aluminum construction was revolutionary. In 1990, nobody built cars from aluminum. It was expensive, difficult to work with, and required new manufacturing techniques. Honda didn't care. They wanted the best, so they built the best. The 3-liter V6 only made 270 horsepower, later increased to 290. By supercar standards, that wasn't much, but Honda used every trick to maximize performance. The engine sat low and forward. The weight distribution was perfect. Everything was optimized for balance, not bragging rights. And then there was VTEC. Variable valve timing was exotic technology in 1990. The engine had a split personality, docile below 6,000 RPM, then transforming into a screaming banshee as the second cam profile engaged. That 8,000 RPM redline was intoxicating. The real revolution was reliability. The NSX started every morning. The air conditioning worked. You could drive it in traffic without overheating. Service intervals were reasonable. Parts were available. It was a supercar you could daily drive, and people did. The handling rewrote the book on what a supercar could be. The steering was telepathic. The balance was neutral, adjustable, forgiving. It taught drivers to be better rather than punishing mistakes. You could explore its limits without fear of it biting back. Ferrari owners scoffed at first. Only 290 horsepower, a V6, from Honda? But then they drove it, and suddenly their 328s and 348s felt agricultural. The NSX made them look old, crude, difficult. The interior was a revelation. Comfortable seats, visibility in all directions, controls that made sense. You could drive for hours without fatigue. The trunk actually held luggage. It was a supercar designed by people who understood real-world use. Production lasted 15 years with minimal changes. By 2005, it was dated. Newer cars were faster, more powerful, more exotic. But the NSX had already made its point. It showed that supercars didn't have to be torture chambers, that reliability and performance weren't mutually exclusive, that sometimes less really is more. The NSX remains one of the most important supercars ever built. Not because it was the fastest or most powerful, but because it showed everyone else how to build a better supercar. Every reliable, daily drivable supercar since owes something to the NSX. Honda proved that suffering wasn't mandatory. The supercar world would never be the same. Number 10. Ferrari F512M. The Ferrari F512M was the swan song for Ferrari's flat 12 engine. The M stood for modificata, and Ferrari threw everything at this final version. It was the last dance for a configuration that had defined Ferrari's top-tier cars for 2 decades. By 1994, Ferrari knew the flat 12's days were numbered. Emissions regulations were tightening. Packaging was becoming impossible. Mid-engine cars were the future. So they decided to give their flagship one last hurrah. And what a hurrah it was. The engine remained at 5 liters but gained more power through careful development. 440 horsepower might not sound like much today, but the delivery was intoxicating. That flat 12 made sounds no other engine could replicate. A metallic shriek overlaid with mechanical fury. It was opera at 8,000 RPM. The biggest changes were aerodynamic. Ferrari gave the F512M a new nose with fixed headlights behind glass covers. The rear was completely redesigned with a new engine cover and different taillights. It looked more modern, more aggressive. Some purists hated it. Others saw it as the design the 512TR should have had from the start. Underneath, Ferrari fitted new titanium connecting rods, a lighter flywheel, and improved engine management. The suspension got new settings. The gearbox was strengthened. Every change was incremental, but together they transformed the car. The driving experience was peak analog Ferrari. No power steering, no electronic aids. Just you, a massive engine behind your shoulders, and physics. The steering was heavy at low speeds but came alive once moving. The gear shift required commitment. The clutch was heavy. It demanded involvement. That engine placement still defined the experience. The weight sat low but far back. In steady-state cornering, it was stable. But lift off mid-corner, and that pendulum wanted to swing. It required smooth inputs and respect. Hero drivers loved it. Everyone else approached with caution. Performance was strong, 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds. Top speed of 196 miles per hour. Not earth-shattering, but the way it delivered that performance was special. The power built linearly. The sound grew from growl to wail. Every gear change was an event. Ferrari built just 501 F512Ms over 2 years. They knew it was the end. After this came the 550 Maranello with a front-mounted V12. The mid-engine F550 followed. The era of the flat 12 was over. Today, the F512M is highly valued, not because it was the best supercar of its era. It wasn't, but because it represented the end of something special, the last of Ferrari's rear-engine supercars, the final flat 12, the closing chapter of a story that began with the 365 GT4 BB. It was a magnificent dinosaur, roaring one last time before extinction. Number 9. Porsche 911 GT2 993. The Porsche 911 GT2 was what happened when Porsche's engineers were told to build a race car for the road. Then someone mentioned it should be rear-wheel drive only and twin-turbocharged. The resulting car was either brilliant or terrifying, depending on your skill level. Based on the 993 turbo, the GT2 stripped away the all-wheel drive system and added more power, a lot more power. The 3.6-liter twin-turbo flat-six made 430 horsepower. Later cars got 450. In a rear-drive 911 that weighed just 1,290 kilograms, the math was scary. Porsche widened the rear track and fitted massive tires. The rear fenders bulged like a bodybuilder's biceps. A huge rear wing provided downforce. Air intakes appeared everywhere. It looked like a 911 that had spent too much time at the gym. But all those modifications couldn't change physics. The engine sat behind the rear axle. The turbos delivered power in big chunks. The chassis had no electronic safety nets. Put your foot down at the wrong moment and the GT2 would try to kill you. The nickname Widowmaker wasn't a joke. Driving a GT2 required commitment. The steering was heavy and direct. The clutch was racing stiff. The ride was harsh. But when you got it right, when you found that narrow window of control, it was magical. The front end would dance while the rear stayed planted. You could feel exactly what every tire was doing. The turbos would spool up with a whoosh, launching you forward with violence. It was addictive. On track, the GT2 was devastating. It won races around the world. The combination of lightweight, big power, and Porsche's engineering made it nearly unbeatable in its class. But this was a race car first, road car second. Porsche built just 172 GT2s. They sold to collectors and seriously skilled drivers. This wasn't a car for showing off at Cars and Coffee. It was a tool for going fast, and it demanded respect. The reward for mastering it was sublime. Today, 993 GT2s are holy grail cars. Values have exploded as collectors recognize what Porsche created. It was the last truly analog 911 supercar. No stability control, no all-wheel drive safety net. Just you, a twin-turbo engine, and your own bravery or stupidity. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference. The GT2 represented everything wonderful and terrifying about 90s supercars. Massive power, minimal weight, no electronic intervention. It was a car that could make heroes or headlines, depending on the driver. Porsche would never build anything quite like it again. Health and safety wouldn't allow it. Number 8. Jaguar XJ220. The Jaguar XJ220 arrived in 1992 surrounded by controversy. Here was supposed to be the spiritual successor to the legendary XJ13, a 220-mile-per-hour hypercar to challenge Ferrari and Bugatti. Then they opened the hood and found a V6. The internet would have exploded if it existed. The original concept had a V12. That's what Jaguar promised. That's what buyers put deposits on. But development problems and cost concerns led to a last-minute switch to a twin-turbo V6 from their Metro 6R racing program. The betrayal felt personal to many. But here's the thing. The XJ220 was still brilliant. That race-derived V6 made 542 horsepower. The aluminum honeycomb chassis was cutting edge. The aerodynamics were so good it barely needed a rear wing. And it really would do 217 miles per hour, making it the fastest production car in the world. The engineering was remarkable. The body was aluminum bonded to that honeycomb tub. The suspension used racing technology. The all-wheel drive system could vary torque distribution. It was a technical tour de force wrapped in a body that looked like speed itself. Driving an XJ220 was an experience. The turbos delivered massive power everywhere. The all-wheel drive provided unshakable traction. The stability at speed was remarkable. At 200 miles per hour, it felt planted, secure, almost relaxed. Well, as relaxed as you can be at 200 miles per hour. The interior was pure 90s luxury, leather everywhere. Wilton wool carpets, air conditioning that worked. You could cruise to the shops or cruise at maximum velocity. It was a grand tourer that happened to be one of the fastest cars on Earth. But the V6 controversy wouldn't go away. Customers who'd ordered V12 cars demanded refunds. The press kept bringing it up. The car cost 700,000 pounds in today's money, but felt somehow diminished by its lesser engine. Production problems made things worse. Jaguar planned 350 cars, but built just 281. Quality issues plagued early cars. The company lost money on every one sold. The racing program that was supposed to promote it never materialized. Today, the XJ220 is appreciated for what it was rather than what it wasn't. It was the fastest car in the world. It was a technical masterpiece. It proved Jaguar could compete with anyone. The V6, it made more power than most V12s anyway. The XJ220 showed that sometimes the best car isn't the one that meets expectations. It's the one that exceeds them in unexpected ways, even if nobody appreciated it at the time. Number 7. Lamborghini Diablo GT. The Lamborghini Diablo GT was what happened when Sant'Agata decided subtlety was overrated. Take a regular Diablo, strip out everything unnecessary, add more power, and create the most hardcore version possible. The result was a car that could scare you just sitting still. Introduced in 1999, the GT took the Diablo formula to extremes. The V12 grew to 6 liters and made 575 horsepower. Weight came down by almost 200 kilograms through liberal use of carbon fiber and deletion of luxuries. No radio, no air conditioning, no sound deadening, just you and that massive engine. The visual changes were aggressive even by Diablo standards. A huge front splitter, wider tracks front and rear, a carbon fiber hood with cooling vents, that iconic roof scoop feeding air to the engine. It looked like it had escaped from a racing paddock. Inside, carbon fiber replaced leather. Racing buckets replaced the regular seats. The dashboard was stripped down to essentials. Everything focused on one goal, going fast. Comfort was not a consideration. This was a car for people who thought the regular Diablo was too soft. Driving the GT was intense. The unassisted steering was heavy at low speeds. The clutch required serious leg strength. The stripped interior meant you heard everything. Engine, transmission, differential, road noise. It was mechanical symphony at full volume. But when you opened the taps, all that discomfort disappeared. The 6-liter V12 was a masterpiece. Power everywhere. A soundtrack that could wake the dead. Acceleration that compressed your spine. 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds felt much faster because you were so connected to the experience. The handling was pure Diablo, which meant it required respect. The rear-wheel drive, rear weight bias, and massive power made it a handful. But the GT's reduced weight and track-focused suspension made it more responsive. You could feel the edge approaching. Whether you had the skill to dance on it was another matter. Lamborghini built just 80 Diablo GTs. Each one sold to collectors who understood what they were getting. This wasn't a car for posing on Rodeo Drive. It was a barely street-legal race car that happened to have license plates. Today, the Diablo GT is the most sought-after version of Lamborghini's 90s supercar. It represents the raw, unfiltered experience that modern supercars have largely abandoned. No electronic nannies, no hybrid assistance, just a huge engine, minimal weight, and your own skill, or lack thereof. It was the last of the truly analog Lamborghinis. After this came the Murcielago with its sophisticated all-wheel drive. The Diablo GT was the end of an era, when supercars could still kill you if you weren't paying attention. Some say that's exactly how it should be. Number 6. Ferrari F40. Yes, the Ferrari F40 started production in 1987, but it carried on until 1992 and defined the decade's supercar ethos. Raw, turbocharged, and completely uncompromising, it was Enzo Ferrari's final masterpiece. A race car barely disguised as a road car. The F40 was Ferrari's response to the Porsche 959. It needed to be the fastest, most extreme road car Ferrari had ever built. Mission accomplished. The twin-turbo V8 made 478 horsepower. The body was Kevlar and carbon fiber. The weight was just 1,100 kilograms. The recipe was simple: maximum power, minimum weight, zero compromises. Everything about the F40 was extreme. The doors were so thin you could see daylight through them. The windows were plastic sliding panels, door handles, pull cables, interior door panels, bare carbon fiber. It was a racing car with the absolute minimum required to be road legal. The driving experience was savage. The twin turbos delivered power like a sledgehammer. Below 3,000 RPM, not much happened. Then boost arrived and the F40 transformed into a missile. No traction control meant wheel spin in third gear. The steering was unassisted and heavy. The gear shift required muscle. The pedals were drilled aluminum. Everything was mechanical, visceral, raw. The cabin was an assault on the senses. Engine noise dominated everything. The gearbox whined. The turbos whooshed and chirped. Heat from the engine soaked through the minimal insulation. After 20 minutes, you were sweating, deafened, and grinning like an idiot. Performance was shocking for the era. 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds. Top speed of 201 miles per hour. But numbers didn't capture the experience. The F40 felt faster because you were so exposed, so connected to the mechanicals. Every input had immediate consequences. The aerodynamics worked but required speed. Below 100 miles per hour, it felt nervous, darty. Above that speed, the downforce planted it to the road. The faster you went, the better it felt, which was terrifying and addictive in equal measure. Ferrari built 1,311 F40s. Originally, they planned just 400, but demand was insane. Even at nearly $400,000, massive money in the late 80s, buyers lined up. Many never drove them, seeing them as investments. Those who did drive them discovered the last truly analog Ferrari supercar. No ABS, no power steering, no electronic aids whatsoever. Just a massive turbo engine, a lightweight body, and physics. It was magnificent and terrifying. Today, the F40 is legendary. Values have skyrocketed as collectors recognize its significance. It was the last Ferrari signed off by Enzo himself. The last with no electronic intervention. The last that could genuinely scare you. It represented everything wonderful and dangerous about supercars before safety regulations and electronic nannies took over. The F40 wasn't just a supercar, it was a philosophy. Maximum attack, no compromise, no mercy. Number 5, Bugatti EB110 SS. The Bugatti EB110 SS was supposed to herald the return of the world's most prestigious automotive brand. Instead, it became a brilliant failure. A technological tour de force that bankrupted its creator, but showed the world what was possible when engineering ambition knew no bounds. Romano Artioli, an Italian entrepreneur, acquired the rights to Bugatti and decided to build the ultimate supercar. Not just fast, but technologically superior to anything else. The EB110 would have all-wheel drive, 4 turbochargers, a carbon fiber monocoque, and active aerodynamics. In 1992, this was space-age stuff. The regular EB110 was already extreme, but the Super Sport took everything further. The 3.5-liter V12 got bigger turbos, making 611 horsepower. Weight came down through extensive use of carbon fiber. The suspension was retuned for track work. It was the EB110 turned up to 11. The engineering was staggering. That V12 had 4 turbos, 1 for every 3 cylinders. The all-wheel drive system could vary torque distribution. The 6-speed manual was mounted longitudinally for better weight distribution. Every decision prioritized performance over cost, and the costs were astronomical. Driving an EB110 SS was like piloting a fighter jet. The acceleration was violent. 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds in 1992 was hypercar territory. The all-wheel drive meant it would accelerate in any weather. The carbon monocoque provided incredible rigidity. It felt hewn from solid, but it was also surprisingly civilized. The interior was trimmed in leather and aluminum. The air conditioning worked. You could see out of it. The controls were heavy but manageable. It was a supercar you could actually use, assuming you could afford the fuel and maintenance. The quad-turbo V12 was smooth at low speeds, but transformed above 4,000 RPM. All four turbos would spool up in sequence, delivering wave after wave of acceleration. The sound was unique, a turbine whine overlaying V12 wail. It was intoxicating and slightly terrifying. The handling was revolutionary. The all-wheel drive provided unshakable traction, but the rear-biased torque split meant you could still play. The carbon chassis gave incredible feedback. The steering was direct and communicative. It changed direction like a much smaller car. But Bugatti's ambition exceeded their finances. Development costs spiraled. The factory was too advanced, too expensive. By 1995, Bugatti was bankrupt. Only 139 EB110s were built, with just 39 in SS specification. The collapse was spectacular. Customers who'd paid deposits lost money. The factory was shuttered. The dream of reviving Bugatti seemed dead. But the EB110 SS had made its point. It showed that with enough engineering, you could build something extraordinary. Today, the EB110 SS is recognized as one of the greatest supercars ever built. It pioneered technologies that wouldn't become mainstream for another decade. It proved that all-wheel drive didn't mean boring, that four turbos could work, that carbon fiber was the future. It was a magnificent failure that succeeded in every way except commercially. Number 4. Nissan R390 GT1. The Nissan R390 GT1 is the unicorn of 90s supercars. Only one road car was ever built, making it rarer than rare. But what a car it was! A Le Mans prototype barely disguised for street use, packing technology that made contemporary supercars look antiquated. Nissan built the R390 to compete at Le Mans in the GT1 category. The rules required a road-going version, so Nissan created one. Just one, the bare minimum to satisfy regulations. It was cynical, brilliant, and resulted in one of the most extreme road cars ever built. The specs were outrageous, a twin-turbo 3.5-liter V8 making 550 horsepower, full carbon fiber construction, active suspension, ground effect aerodynamics, a claimed top speed of 220 miles per hour. In 1998, these were fantasy numbers. The engine sat in the middle, but everything else was pure race car. The suspension could adjust ride height for different speeds. The aerodynamics generated massive downforce. The sequential gearbox shifted in milliseconds. It was a Le Mans car that happened to have headlights and turn signals. Inside, Nissan made token efforts at civility. There were 2 seats technically, some carpet, a climate control system that might have worked, but nobody was fooling anyone. This was a race car with the absolute minimum required for road registration. The single road car lived at Nissan's Zama warehouse. Journalists occasionally drove it on track. Their reports were unanimous. It was devastatingly fast, but required race car driver skills. The acceleration was brutal. The braking was violent. The cornering forces were extreme. Everything happened at race car speeds. On track, the race versions showed promise but never won Le Mans. Reliability issues and bad luck plagued the program. After 1999, rule changes killed the GT1 category. The R390 program ended, leaving just that single road car as evidence it existed. Today, that lone R390 GT1 remains with Nissan. It's not for sale at any price. It represents the absolute extreme of 90s supercar development, a car so focused on performance that building a road version was literally an afterthought. The R390 GT1 proved that the line between race car and road car could be so thin as to be meaningless. It was barely street legal, monumentally impractical, and absolutely magnificent. One car, one statement, one legend. Number 3. Porsche 911 G1 Strassen version. The Porsche 911 GT1 Strassen version might have the least convincing claim to being a 911 in Porsche history. It shared essentially nothing with the road car except a vague resemblance from certain angles. It was a pure Le Mans prototype wearing a disguise, and that disguise wasn't fooling anyone. Like Nissan with the R390, Porsche needed to build road versions of their GT1 race car. Unlike Nissan, they actually built more than one, about 20, though exact numbers remain unclear. Each one was a barely street-legal race car sold to collectors with very deep pockets and presumably very understanding neighbors. The engineering was pure Le Mans. A twin-turbo flat six mounted in the middle, not the rear like a proper 911. The engine made 544 horsepower in street trim, though race versions made more. Carbon fiber monocoque construction, full ground effect aerodynamics, a sequential racing gearbox. It was about as related to a regular 911 as a Formula One car is to a Corolla. The bodywork was designed entirely for Le Mans. Long tail for stability at 200+ miles per hour. Massive air intakes feeding various coolers. A front end shaped by wind tunnel data, not stylists. The only 911 cues were the headlights and, actually, just the headlights. Inside, Porsche made slightly more effort than Nissan. There were 2 carbon bucket seats, some switchgear that looked vaguely production-based. Even air conditioning, though using it at speed, was optimistic. But the overwhelming impression was racing car. Carbon fiber everywhere. A digital dash from the race car. That sequential shifter sprouting from the center console. Driving a GT1 on the road was an exercise in absurdity. The clutch was brutally heavy. The ride was harsh beyond description. The ground effect aerodynamics only worked above huge speeds. The turning circle was measured in zip codes. It was a Le Mans car with license plates, nothing more. But on a track, it transformed. The aerodynamics generated massive downforce. The suspension, freed from pretending to handle road bumps, delivered incredible mechanical grip. The sequential box ripped through gears faster than thought. It was devastatingly, outrageously fast. Porsche sold each Strassen version for around 1,800,000 Deutsche Marks. Buyers knew they were getting a race car. Most went straight into collections, occasionally emerging for track days where they could embarrass more conventional supercars. The GT1 program lasted just 2 years before rule changes ended it. Porsche never won Le Mans with the car, though they came close. But the road cars remain as monuments to a unique era when manufacturers built pure race cars for the street to satisfy homologation rules. Today, GT1 Strassen versions rarely appear for sale. When they do, prices are astronomical. They represent the absolute extreme of 90s supercar development, race cars so thinly disguised as road cars that nobody even pretended otherwise. They were magnificent, absurd, and could never exist under modern regulations. Number 2, Mercedes-Benz CLK GTR. The Mercedes-Benz CLK GTR makes the Porsche GT1 look positively practical. This was Mercedes' interpretation of the GT1 rules, and they interpreted them as literally as possible. Build a Le Mans car, add the legal minimum to make it road legal, charge $2 million. Profit? Mercedes needed to homologate their CLK GTR race car, which meant building 25 road versions. They did exactly that, 25 coupes and later 6 roadsters. Each one was hand-built, cost more than most houses, and was about as practical as a chocolate teapot. But what a teapot! The heart was a 6.9-liter V12 making 604 horsepower. Not turbocharged, Mercedes wanted reliability for Le Mans. The engine sat behind the driver in a full carbon monocoque. The bodywork was carbon Kevlar. The whole car weighed just 1,400 kilograms despite its size. The engineering was extraordinary. The suspension was pure race car with token adjustments for road use. The sequential gearbox could swap cogs in milliseconds. The aerodynamics generated so much downforce that theoretical top speed dropped as the wings worked. It was a racing car first, second, and third. Mercedes made minimal concessions to road use. There were carpets, leather seats, air conditioning that sort of worked, electric windows, but these were like putting a bow tie on a gorilla. Nobody was fooled. This was a Le Mans car with turn signals. Driving a CLK GTR on the road was comedy. The ground clearance was minimal, speed bumps were impassable. The turn and circle was enormous. The clutch required Olympic athlete leg strength. The sequential gearbox clunked and whined. Parking sensors? You needed a ground crew. But find an open road or track and everything changed. The V12 delivered massive power everywhere. The sequential box fired through ratios faster than a conventional manual could manage. The downforce glued it to the road. The carbon brakes could seemingly defy physics. It was outrageously fast and surprisingly manageable at speed. The race versions dominated FIA GT racing, winning multiple championships. The road cars went to collectors who understood what they were buying, a Le Mans car that happened to be road legal. Most have barely been driven. They're too valuable, too impractical, too special to risk. Mercedes charged $1.5 million per car in late 90s money. They could have charged more. Demand exceeded supply. But Mercedes wasn't trying to make money. They were making a statement. This was engineering without compromise, cost be damned. Today, CLK GTRs are museum pieces that occasionally appear at auctions for telephone number prices. They represent the absolute pinnacle of the GT1 era, race cars so extreme that calling them road cars required significant imagination. They were the four-wheeled equivalent of keeping a tiger as a pet. Theoretically possible, but nobody sensible would try it. Number 1, McLaren F1. And here we are, the McLaren F1, the greatest supercar of the 90s, the greatest supercar ever. Many would argue yes, Gordon Murray's masterpiece redefined what was possible, then set records that stood for over a decade. In a decade of excess, the F1 was excess perfected. Start with the philosophy. Murray wanted the ultimate driver's car, not the most powerful, not the most technologically complex, the best. Every decision flowed from that goal. Natural aspiration over turbos for response, rear-wheel drive for purity, a central driving position because that's optimal, no compromises. The engine was a 6.1-liter V12 built by BMW Motorsport. 627 horsepower might not sound extraordinary today, but in 1992 it was immense. More importantly, it delivered that power with savage beauty. The red line was 8,500 RPM. The sound was Formula One meets Philharmonic Orchestra. But the engine was just part of the story. The F1 pioneered carbon fiber construction in road cars. The monocoque weighed just 100 kilograms but was incredibly strong. The suspension used Formula One technology. Even the tools were titanium to save weight. The finished car weighed just 1,140 kilograms. The central driving position changed everything. You sat in the middle with passengers on either side and slightly behind. Visibility was perfect. The driving position was optimal. You felt like a Formula One driver because essentially you were. The pedals were perfectly placed. The gear lever fell naturally to hand. Everything was exactly where it should be. Then there was the gold. The engine bay was lined with gold foil, the best heat reflector available. It looked like jewelry because in a way it was. This was mechanical art. Every component was the best possible solution. Cost was irrelevant if it improved the car. The driving experience rewrote the supercar rulebook. The unassisted steering delivered microscopic feedback. The clutch was light. The gearbox was precise. Unlike contemporary supercars that fought you, the F1 worked with you. It was demanding but not difficult, fast but not frightening. at least until you explored its limits. Those limits were stratospheric: 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds, 0 to 100 in 6.3 seconds. Top speed, 240.1 miles per hour, making it the world's fastest production car. That record stood until 2005. With 1990s technology, McLaren had built something that took 12 years to beat. But speed was just part of the story. The F1 was usable. The air conditioning worked. The luggage compartments held real bags. You could drive it daily, and some owners did. It started every time. It didn't overheat. It was a supercar that actually worked. McLaren built just 106 F1s, including prototypes and race versions. Each took 3.5 months to build. The price was $1 million, but McLaren lost money on every one. It didn't matter. This was about creating the best, not making profit. Today, F1s trade for over $20 million when they appear for sale, which is rarely. They've become the ultimate collector car. Too valuable to drive, but too magnificent not to. They represent the absolute pinnacle of analog supercar development. After the F1, supercars became faster but also heavier, more complex, more electronic. The F1 was the last of the pure driver's cars. No stability control, no traction management, no electronic interference, just a perfect chassis, a magnificent engine, and the driver. It was Murray's vision realized without compromise. The McLaren F1 didn't just win our countdown, it defined what winning meant. In a decade of spectacular supercars, it stood alone. The fastest, the most advanced, the most pure, the best. 25 years later, nothing has really replaced it. Faster cars exist, more powerful cars exist, but none combine speed, usability, and driver involvement like the F1. It remains the high watermark of supercar design. The greatest of the great, the king of the 90s, the king of them all. And there you have it, 20 supercars from the 90s, ranked from the ambitious failures to the absolute pinnacle of automotive engineering. The decade gave us everything from kit car wannabes to Le Mans refugees to the magnificent McLaren F1. Some broke new ground, others just broke. But each one pushed the boundaries of what was possible. And that's what made the 90s such an incredible time for supercars. What's your take? Did we rank them fairly? Is there a 90s supercar we missed that deserved a spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We love a good debate about these legendary machines. And if you enjoyed this trip through supercar history, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got plenty more automotive content coming your way. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time when we tackle another automotive countdown. Until then, keep dreaming about that center driving seat.